So we're going to finish up the lesson today for 1.4, equations of lines. All right, guys. So there's two equations of lines that we really focused on, or really we're going to be using especially for this lesson, and it's these two here. One of them is point slope, and the other is slope intercept. And these are the two main forms that we have. Now, whenever we find the equation of a line, we want it in the form of y equals mx plus b, our slope-intercept form. So part of the homework is finding the equation of the line. This is what we want it in. Now, the only other equation we have for this here is our slope formula, which is our y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, which is our change in y over the change in x. Change in y over change in x. And we worked on some of this yesterday. Now, the first thing we're looking at today is this here, modeling with mathematics. So using the information they give us to find an equation of a line and then kind of interpret and use the two together. Now, two venues, prom venues, charge a rental fee plus a fee per student. The table shown below shows the cost for different number of students at Lakeside Inn. So we have Lakeside Inn. The total cost y in dollars for X students at Sunview Resort is represented by this equation. So we'll have Sunview. Now, there's two things we want to know. One of them, which venue charges less per student? And the second part, well, don't put a line through it. How many students must attend for the total cost to be the same? Okay. Now, before we start finding anything, we need the two equations. Well, Sunview charges how much per student? How much does Sunview charge per student? $10. Because X is the number of students, so they're charging $10 per student. Because they have a fee per student, but they also have a rental fee. So what would the rental fee be for Sunview? $600. So we have Sunview. We also have Lakeside. Cost per student. I don't know why I wrote cost because it's just going to be per student. I have no idea what I did. Oh, first one's recognize handwriting. Okay. That's kind of cool. Yeah, that's all I was wanting to do was move it over just a little bit. So, how much does it cost per student at Lakeside? Do we know? No. We don't know the cost per student at Lakeside or the rental fee cost because they just gave us points. So what we need to do first is to find the slope or the cost per student for Lakeside, and then find the equation. Because if we find the equation, it will give us the rental cost, because the rental cost is the same as the y-intercept. Slope is our y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So what y value can we use for this here first? Because we have several different ones to choose from. Yeah. So we can use 100 for x. You're good. And it would be 1,500 for the y. So we can pick that point. We can pick 100, 1,500 as one of our points. Which other point do we want to use? $2,000? Okay, this one right here. 2,100 for the y and 150 for the x. Now the 2 points that we pick, especially out of a list like this here, doesn't really matter. We can pick any 2 points. Any set of 2 points that we want, as long as you don't pick the same point twice. So we just can't pick the same number twice. So we can't take 100, 1,500 and 100, 1,500 because that's just a single point. Now we just need to simplify this. Now we could plug this entire thing into the calculator, let the calculator do it for us, and then we're done. If we did this by hand, we would have negative 600 on top and negative 50 on bottom. Well, the negative divided by a negative is a positive, and 600 divided by 50 is 12. So the cost per student is 12. So which one's cheaper per student? Sunview, because Sunview is only how much? 10. Now we do need to figure out the rental cost, because we'll need the rental cost to be able to determine when they're going to be the same. And to do that, we're going to use point slope form. Now we could technically do this by our slope intercept form, but this is a little bit, not so much quicker. We don't have to plug anything back in. Now we know what the slope is. Our value of m is 12. Now we need a point. We got 5 to pick one from. So which one do we want to use? And it doesn't really matter. Someone give me an x value. 150. So since we chose 150 for x, the y value has to be 2,100. $2.1 thousand. Now we just need to get y by itself. Well, the first thing we can do is distribute to 12. So y minus 2,100 is equal to, well, 12 times x is 12x. 12 times 1,150 is 1,800. So we have it, the distributive property simplified. Now the last thing we need to do is get y by itself. So we can do what? Well, the only thing with y at the moment, because adding 2100 to both sides will get y by itself. It'll tell us that it's equal to 12x plus 300. So we have our other equation. So again, it is telling us that the cost per student, or our slope, is still 12. But the original rental cost is, so one of them, so Lakeview is starting off cheaper, but it is more expensive per student. Sunview is cheaper per student, but starts off more expensive. So at some point, they're going to cross. Any questions on this here before we answer the last part? We can see that, but what they want to know is how many students must attend for the total cost to be the same? Well, I'm going to write this back up here so we can see this here. Well, we said X is the number of students. Well, what's the Y value? Y is the dollars, the total cost, yes? So if we're saying we want to see when their total cost is going to be the same, well, we just need to see when these two sides of the equation are equal. They're the same. Set them equal to each other and solve. What can we do first? On the right-hand side, we're going to be left with 12x because 300 minus 300 is 0. On the left-hand side, we have 10x plus 300 is equal to, what do we do next? We'll subtract 10x from both sides, which will tell us that 2x is equal to. Questions on this so far? So, if 150 students are going to show up for the prom, which would be the better choice, Sunview or Lakeside? Because?
Oh, they're the same.
They're the same. Yeah. At 150, it doesn't matter. Financially speaking, anyways. They're going to be the same, yes? Right. Now, when we get to this point, one thing, logically speaking, is that if we had, say, 148, then Lakeview would be cheaper. Yeah, it's literally a $4 difference. So, I mean, realistically, if we're looking purely mathematically, at 148, Lakeview's cheaper, but at that point, it's at that point, you just might as well make up your mind on that. But if we're going beyond that, because if we said instead of that we had 200 students, that's a difference of $2 per student, and not so much that, but should be 50 because we're 50 over where they were equal. So we're looking at somewhere around, not 400, but $100 difference. Because if we said 10 times 200 plus 600, 10 times 200 is 2,000 plus 600 is 2,600. Our 12 times 200 plus 300 is going to be 12 times 200 is 24. 100 plus 300 is 2,700. So now we're talking about a $100 difference. Good. Again, we've got to get farther away from that to really make a difference, because the only difference between them is $2 per student. So it's not a huge difference, but there we have it. So here, when are they the same? 150 students. Yeah, especially if you're anywhere close to 150 students, there's not a whole lot of, I would start picking out which one I like better. Questions on this here? We ready for the next one? Well, instead of looking at two sides, we're going to look at a third one. What if Maple Ridge charges a rental fee of $10 per student? The total cost is $1,900 for 140 students. Describe the number of students that must attend for Maple Ridge to be less than the total cost of the other two venues. Okay. So first off, we do need an equation before we can do anything else. Because if we have an equation, then we can compare it with the other two. Now, they did give us the slope. The slope is what? $10 per student. Did they give us a point? $1,900 would be X or Y. Because it is the cost. And X is the number of students, so it would be. Questions on how we set this up? Now, we need to get Y by itself. So the first thing we can do is distribute the 10. Well, 10 times X is 10X. 10 times 140 is 1,400. Last thing we need to do is add 1,900 to both sides, which tells us Y is equal to 500. Well, Sunview and Maple have the same cost per student, yes? If two lines have the same slope, we say that they are what? Starts with a P, huh? Parallel. So will they ever cross? No. So Maple Ridge will always be cheaper than Sunview. So no matter what happens, it's always going to be cheaper. So to figure out how many students Sunview and Maple need for them to be cheaper as well, 0, because they're always going to be cheaper. But the main one that we need to see is Lakeside. How many students we need for Lakeside. And to do that, well, we're just going to set the two equations equal to each other and solve for the value of X. What can we do first? I mean, yeah, we can do that. Minus the 10X. Works. Is that what you were going to say too? Or we're going somewhere different? I was just seeing what. Yeah. Yeah, we ended up saying the exact same thing. I couldn't quite hear what you said. Yeah. So 500 is equal to 2x plus 300. The next thing we would do is Subtract the 300. You're good. Telling us that 2x is equal to 200. And last but not least, we would divide by 2. Sinus x is equal to 100. So they need to have at least 100 students for Maple to be cheaper. Well, 100 students for them to be the same. Anything more than that, then they would be cheaper. Questions on any of this here? Well, we did have a little bit more of this, but I'm going to give you the rest of the class time to work on the homework. Yes.